Hello, everybody, and welcome to the CornCon 10 panel. We're excited to have all of you here with us today. And our topic is, it's the end of the world as we know it, and we feel fine. So we're going to have a fun conversation with everybody here today. And notice our fun little backgrounds, except for Joey, because he's working from home today. It's all good. So, but we're getting into the spirit of things overall. What I'd like to do quickly is to have my panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll kick off our discussions. So Amanda, would you like to start?
Sure. Amanda Fennell. I am a Chief Security Officer at Relativity, and I've been there since 2018 with a background that's heavily focused on forensics and digital investigations.
I love it. Ricardo?
Richardo Lafosse. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Kraft Heinz. Been there an epic 7 months strong. Background in finance, healthcare, and now I'm dipping my toes in manufacturing. Exciting.
I love it. Good to have you with us today, Ricardo. And Joey?
Hi, everyone. Joey Johnson, Chief Information Security Officer with Premise Health. I've been there in that role for 10 years, which is crazy, but that's real. So yeah, we have about 800 wellness centers across America, serving large self-insured companies. So, look forward to it.
Well, awesome. Thanks for being with us today. Well, as we all know, 2020 has been quite the year for everybody, and that's great. Our first topic is going to be with, it's great, it starts with an earthquake. So we've actually had a few earthquakes actually in 2020, including one, a small one that we felt in Georgia not too long ago. But setting that aside of everything else, as with every great challenge or shakeup, we have to assess the state where we're in and what we have to work with now that the ground has settled, but maybe rattled a little bit first. Like the Rebel Alliance, strategizing against the Galactic Empire security leaders need to review the people, processes, and technology to strengthen the lacking in combat all these crazy cyber attacks that we're having out there. So really discovering the security tools and measures that are working and making them even better. It's really about surviving and flourishing during this time. Would you all agree about that? So with that said, let's go ahead and sort of begin our questions. The chosen ones, Anakin, Luke, and Rey, all had to leave behind what they knew to face the unknown. So Amanda, what do you think about how do you react to the sudden changes in your security environment and its processes? And were you prepared for, do you think that you're prepared for what really is going to come next? I mean, it's been like a game of asteroids at the end of the day, 2020.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm going to really take a big leap here and just say that I feel like I'm trying to encapsulate the aura of Luke, and that he was always able to pivot in different environments and get the high ground also for some people, for Obi-Wan. But I think that the biggest thing that was difficult that we had to deal with the unpredictability of this was threat modeling. So how we would have attacks coming at us was very different from a hybrid, or at this point, a completely remote environment. So we had to change our threat modeling and redo them. And we had to run through them again to try to figure out where our weaknesses were, and then try to shore up any of those in a very quick time frame. So we did definitely reassess like which tools were the most useful for us. And we definitely took a little bit of a hit in UEBA because the profiling kind of got thrown out the door. You know, what times people were signing on and from what IPs and stuff started to just really be something we couldn't rely on for our investigation workflow. So I think at the end, we focused on refreshing and making sure we did have to add a few tools on that were for this type of environment. We had to work on the people to make sure that the security culture pivoted to their home environment. And so we had to teach them, and we did webinars on this as well, like get your router, don't use default passwords. Like, I know my security is good at the company, I don't know about yours at home. So we had to try to retrain people and make sure that they really leveled up their home security as well, since that's what they're going through. So I think we did a lot of assessment on the people, the process, and the tech that we were using, and we shored those gaps up if we found any within, I think it was like 6 weeks.
Well, really, at the end of the day, I think everyone at home working remotely got a free great security assessment in their home networks.
I'd like to think that. Yeah. That's how I'll market it. That'll be great. The whole company will love it.
So Joey, the Jedi lost sight of themselves thanks to the dark side of the Force and were destroyed. what have you done to reclaim visibility in your new security environment and to locate these vulnerabilities?
You know, I think for us, our general tech stack, you know, we had started the journey of everything to the cloud, you know, a while ago. Everyone had laptops. We didn't have to make a lot of major technology changes to continue operating the way we had. What we found was the biggest challenge was, certainly for us in healthcare, with our clinical workforce, you know, and some of our other team members, those in the fitness centers and places like that, they were not acclimated to being in front of a screen on a computer 8 hours a day. They were acclimated to working person to person, face to face, dealing with patients, dealing with doctors, dealing with members. And so having to pivot the entire, like where they worked didn't matter as much as the fact that they weren't engaging with humans directly. They were engaging through a screen. And that made a lot of other technology use cases come up that we hadn't really had to navigate as much before, right? They were finding different uses for teams. They were finding different ways to collaborate. They were using tools that weren't necessarily sanctioned, right? Technology is so ubiquitously available to individuals right now. They don't need to rely on an organization for that. So if they decided they wanted to go stand up a Slack channel and do something, there was very little prohibiting them from doing that if they weren't using corporate credentials. And so having to kind of rein that in, having to get the workforce educated, kind of, you know, Amanda, to what you were saying, right? It's like, I don't know what you're doing at home. And if you don't need to do it through the technology that I'm provisioning, there's certainly risk there. We ran into issues around having to deal with things like, what's Alexa listening to while you're working, right? All of those kind of things came up. So those are some things that, you know, we hadn't fully planned for and had to navigate through. And I agree, the user behavior monitoring, right? All of a sudden people's hours are way off. They're working from here, they're working from there. All kinds of different things were happening. So we had to adjust to that pretty quickly as well.
Yeah, it definitely set the world upside down at the beginning. I think things have settled in, but there's a bit of disruption for those that are, you know, certainly having children at home and having to educate that way from a distance learning perspective as well, pairing with maintaining the work that they have to keep up with in the meetings. And to your point, Joey, the fatigue is definitely real out there. And I'm seeing it across the board. You know, I have family members that are teachers actually, and they're feeling the fatigue and the stress of preparing for like a webinar every single hour of the day, and even having to take some things out there, you know, so it's a lot. It's been a lot of change for a lot of people. Ricardo.
It's not just Star Wars. So it's also like Stranger Things. We're living in the upside down for those people who are Stranger Things fans.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ricardo, this is meant for you. For Sith, always two, there are a master and an apprentice. As a CISO, how are you assessing what further tools and training your security team needs to detect and respond to threats, especially hidden ones that are out there? And do you have these essential apprentices on your team, or have you had team members help you in this type of process? And have you seen some folks on your team also, or even in your organization, really step up during the pandemic in helping you overcome these new challenges?
What a fantastic question. I'd like to say that our team has traditionally been almost like a brick and mortar team, if I like to put it like that, where they go into the office, they know where the data's at, it's in the data center. They're not used to having a remote workforce. Neither are they used to really working with SaaS applications and IaaS applications. So there has been quite a bit of tooling that has been introduced to our team, how to work on infrastructure as a code. As we went remote, we adopted various parts of the cloud very quickly because it made a lot of sense that we were already tapping into the SaaS market, but we didn't have our traditional controls in that SaaS sense. So what we had is a few members of the team said, well, I'm very interested in coding. I really like the idea of getting into API, seeing what we can do to protect the organization, get greater visibility. So I had these hidden gems start to come up and say, this is cool, I'd really like to tackle this. And I gave them the opportunity to work with those specific product teams to better understand how we could get greater visibility and controls in our SaaS environment. And then juxtaposed on our emerging cloud environment, we already had started this process, but there's an opportunity for us to fast track the training, the ability to get our hands dirty in the environment. And it was a not just security, but IT and the business collaborative effort to really embrace the cloud and learn how it functions and have it be as a driver and a catalyst to move a lot of our legacy applications into a cloud environment. So it was a really unique dynamic as we started going to remote. And then of course you had a few of the people on the team, they're like, are we really gonna allow split tunneling? Oh my God. Oh no, the house will burn down if we do that. And then you took a step back and said, why does it matter? If you're putting the controls around the data, around the SaaS environment, it shouldn't matter if you're on grandma's iPad, your dog's Kindle, whatever it is, the controls should follow the data. And that's the new approach that we've been taking. And it's a little different to have everyone's opinions start converge together, but it's really neat and unique. And I don't know if under what circumstances this confluence of different ideas to one solid goal would ever happen. I'm not saying pandemic's great by any stretch of imagination. I hate being stuck in my basement every day.
There's been some blessings in this cloud, and this thing, overall, I think there's been some awakenings, on different things and different levels. I mean, I'm an optimist. I like to look at the glass half full at the end of the day. So how I've been kind of managing some of this, overall is taking a step back and reflecting of like, what are some lessons to learn and to apply forward and to improve upon just across the board, whether it is like from a technology perspective, personal perspective, professional perspective. But I think for many of us out there, that's, the way I think a lot of us at the first with such a dramatic change being thrown at us have really, worked to cope with it. And I think those that are the CISOs out there, like yourselves, have adapted to the change fairly rapidly and are really proving themselves to be very strong leaders and look from their, leading from the front. And I would say that about all three of you guys.
Yeah, and one thing I would highlight from that, this is also a great opportunity to get more closer to your team because you lose that, hey, let's all go lunch together. No one really likes to sit there and do a virtual lunch with the team or with anyone. I'm being completely honest. Maybe once a week or once every other week. But it gives you that more one-on-one time with your specific key team members instead of having the group. So, I mean, there's pros and cons to the whole situation. But I do miss my Slack space. Not the tool Slack. I miss my own Slack space. I would like to separate everything.
Well, let's change topics a little bit. 2020 has also been quite the year of hurricanes. At the end of the day, we have one called Beta, like zooming around. Like we ran out of the alphabet from A to Z, which is just astounding to me. I don't actually remember the last time that's happened. So I've never seen a hurricane Beta. God only knows if we end up with a hurricane Zeta. Or else that's at the end of the day. But really, the next topic is the eye of the hurricane and listen to yourself churn. So once we've really established our security programs like you guys have, the capabilities of our teams can, start really getting things going and perform. And I think all of us are the type A where we just constantly have to be moving forward and figure out our next steps out there. So with enterprises out there, you have to literally align with the business goals that you have. You can't just keep going on your end. The best effective security organizations do align with their organization's business goals. But cybersecurity can help you get there with a lot less risk, because y'all know. And we really have to start looking at some of these new initiatives moving forward. So kind of comparing it into the land of Star Wars, like obtaining the balance of the Force, we will need to balance effective cybersecurity and seamless operations, and the task certainly much easier than done. So with that said, Joey, the rebels had to move bases constantly to stay ahead of the Empire with mixed success. Where do you see your workforce operating in the next few months? At home, in the office, or hybrid of the two? And really, what do you foresee as some new security challenges as you're going to maybe have some of this hybrid environment, if you know, or just kind of adapting to the changes that are happening out there? I know you've made a lot of them and have adapted quite well, but what, you know, kind of looking a little bit at the next few months in the future overall. Love to get your perspective there.
It's interesting, I think, for us. So we're kind of looking at the dynamic of not just what does it look like for us to go back to the office and when, but because we're providing hundreds of on-site wellness centers for large companies, you know, we're also working with them on their plans for how they're going back and when and what that means and how they do it safely and what role do we play in that, whether it's screening or testing or whatever. So there's a lot of dynamics. I think that, you know, we're starting to see the novelty is wearing off for a lot of folks, and they're kind of ready to go back, and people have different levels of their feeling of safety around it. But it's kind of, I think for us, you know, it's kind of interesting. We look at a lot of teams raise their hand and said, I'm perfectly happy in this work from home thing into perpetuity. But then other teams start saying, well, I kind of need to get out of this house, right? I mean, you know, when we get to January, you know, there's either gonna be a whole lot of babies being born or a whole lot of divorces going down, right? It's been really either good for people or stressful for people, and people are realizing they missed that interaction. And what we're seeing that's kind of the neat dynamic that's playing out now is where folks said they didn't want to come in, and then other folks are kind of saying now they want to come back in. Those team members that said they didn't want to go back in are starting to reconsider it and say, well, now is it the FOMO train? Am I missing out on things? I think from a technology perspective, we're kind of prepared to support it either way, in the same way we were when everybody had to shift really quickly. We don't have to make a whole lot of changes there, but we do continue to have to deal with, at least on the provision part, making determinations around what kind of product we're going to offer as it best applies to the market, right? When we went into the whole pandemic, we had one virtual health offering. Now we have nearly 20. Right, and so we're having to continue to make determinations on what are the things that we need to prioritize the most. How quickly do we need to get those new products stood up? And then obviously, you know, the faster you try to stand up a new technology, the more risk you're going to inherit with it. And so we have to align with the business on kind of what that's going to be and where our risk tolerance is around those things. So, you know, it kind of continues to evolve every single day. I think we would all agree is we make decisions differently now than we did in the year of March.
Good points there, Joey. Ricardo, lightsabers and blasters and Beskar steel, all tools have their best uses, as you know, in certain circumstances. What new security tools are you thinking about moving forward with, and which ones do you think you've learned that you don't need during the pandemic?
Well, we all can't be cool like Amanda and be cloud all. So let me start there. For us, it's really having the tools and knowledge to be able for us to operate securely and safely in the cloud. This can be a mix of cloud environmental security controls, aka guardrails, whatever you'd like to call it this week, more visibility within the APIs from our SaaS vendors, so more of that cloud visibility controls with a heavy dose of automation. We are not at any point right now where we can automate the vast majority of our security operations, even from the most simplest tasks. So that's one of our key focus over 6 months, to really free up people from the manual, laborious, low-level tasks that could easily be automated and have them work on more complex issues. And then we're also taking a hard look at our tool portfolio to understand, do we have single tools that only work on-premise that can either be migrated to a hybrid solution or have a more encompassing tool set that it doesn't matter where the data resides, it's just ensuring that we have the controls around it. And those could be either CASB or DLP, whatever you want to call it. But I think where we are really focusing on are more of the softer software. Yeah, I'm gonna say softer software. And what that really means is our people training. So this has been a great opportunity for us to start cleaning up our legacy environment. And I'm gonna pick on Amanda again. I'm sorry you don't have thousands of years of legacy environment, but this has been a great opportunity for us to take a very hard look and say, we have not decommissioned this old legacy software platform because 3 people in the entire organization do it. No one has ever taken initiative to clean it up. So this has been a great opportunity to clean up and modernize various parts of our organization, security and non-security related. But this also catalysts into security being an enabler for the rest of IT and not just being that solid focus that if it's not InfoSec, we don't care. We're all in this together, because if we remove legacy, inherently, we're also increasing our security posture.
Wonderful. I'm kind of curious about what you said in regards to the on-premise aspects, of tools there. So is that going to be a precursor for how you look at evaluating moving forward any new technologies in your organization?
Yes, absolutely. A perfect example is DLP. We have a older DLP solution that will only work on CIS shares. Well, that's great if that's all you use. But now you have OneDrive, you have Box, you have all this hybrid solutions across the board. And if the tools doesn't scale, it just isn't the right fit anymore. And this has been a great opportunity to take a step back and say, all right, we have a good business case for this. This is a great opportunity to either get a new tool that has that enhanced features, or take it out back and get rid of it and have something new that can be pervasive across your organization. Again, not every tool can be ripped out like that, but I think those are the hard looks that we're taking at right now.
I mean, that's really interesting. Amanda, Thrawn was the most strategic leader in the Empire ever due to his love of information and fostering the talents of his crew. How are you collaborating with your business leaders and your team about the next goals for your company? And what kind of role does security have with all that? And I love how you have really, when have gotten to know you, how much you interact with your team. You have so much fun with your team. Actually, I have fun with your team. And you, but at our ISD programs and stuff like that. So, you guys are so fun. And then actually with Ricardo and you,
Ricardo.
You guys are like the funnest people.
Oh my God,
but you guys are like the funnest people.
It's a great question. I'll say that the first thing that's just really pertinent to this discussion is that we actually, all of our meetings for Calder 7 are with Star Wars theme names. So we have a stand-up every Monday. That's the Mos Eisley Cantina Talk, which is my background. And we have some other ones for strategy discussions that are with my direct reports that's called Yavin Prime. And we have one-on-ones, which are Hoth Rebel Base. So we already use a lot of these in Falcon debriefs and things like that. But I think when it comes to cross-functional, we've got it kind of locked in terms of my team, because I have representatives from these different functional areas that are the SMEs in those areas. So we are already working on our 2021 and 2022 strategy right now. And so our roadmap is closely aligned with that. And we actually have a person embedded for the entire product management team is embedded in our team. So we have a lot of collaboration already that goes on from my team and also from cross-functionally. But I actually think the business leaders part, what's been helpful the most for me is that the way we're structured, there's different reporting mechanisms for a CISO, and I'm actually direct to the CEO. So as a consequence, I'm in every meeting 3 times a week with all the other executives. So I'm there almost as that representative to hear if there's something they're strategizing that security needs to be embedded in more. So it's having that ability, that contact pretty consistently. The other thing, I actually wrote this down when I was thinking about this. It said what were one of the concerns. The concern I continue to bring up is scaling. So we have issues with the fact that when you're more immature in your program, you try to throw people at a problem. But there's a reason why automation is a buzzword. We won't be able to sustain that. So we have to focus on pivoting towards automation. And in order to do that, we have to take our heads out of the fire hose to go do that automation work. So we have a couple teams in our Calder 7 group that already do that, but we need to do more of a focus on that. So that's one of the things that I definitely bring up a lot to the company. And then the thing that kind of wraps this all in a bow in terms of strategy integration, discussion with other executives, making sure we're aware of some concerns we have and how to raise those concerns. The last one is we actually have a tech exec meeting, which is, and it feels a little bit like, I don't know if anyone watches The Office, but it feels like the 4 people that get called in, these 4 owners of the property. So the tech exec is the CIO, the chief product officer, our board member and founder, Andrew Seja, our CEO, myself, so we all, and also engineering CTO. So all of us come together once a week for 2 hours, and we go through everything that's going on and how we strategize for the future or how we deal with issues currently. So there's collaboration is like really big deal for us.
I love it. That's awesome. That's how it's supposed to work. So our next topic is feeling pretty psyched. And I think I'm pretty psyched to be with all of you today. So hopefully you're feeling pretty psyched right now.
I'm psyched I don't have to recite all the words to the song. I used to have to write this down with a tape to learn all the words. So I'm just psyched I don't have to sing it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And
Amanda, I think we should close with that song.
Oh yeah? Well,
oh, okay. We'll have to tee that up somehow. But I have to tell you a funny thing about the song though. That was the prom, my high school prom song, theme song. So, yeah, it was kind of wild. It was a little depressing at the time, but I thought it wasn't a schmoopy song to do your last dance to, but it ended up working out. Everyone just started jumped around, but it was pretty fun. In a dark place where we find ourselves, a little more knowledge lights our way, said one particularly famous Jedi master. Our dark place, as we all know in cybersecurity, was the beginning of the pandemic. But since then, we have gained a lot more knowledge about security platforms, as well as insights into our solutions and what, really reaching the potential and exceeding the potential of our teams. I've been amazed at my team and hearing from all of you how your teams have been amazing and have pivoted. And, and we've been put forth with a lot of different hardships and challenges. We've persevered. And really these patches of light are leading our way to the future. And we're really, I think, even in a better position now to make better and more informed security decisions than maybe even before in March. But how we prepare is going to make a difference. So we have to think about it from our outlook perspective. So, Amanda, this is a question for you. If Princess Leia had the cloud, it might have been easier to send the Death Star plans to the rebels. How should enterprises prepare to use cloud infrastructure and applications in the coming months? And what do you think are some of the new best practices that have emerged in defining data storage and protection policies regarding the cloud?
There's no way to start this without at least the quote that, was it Lando says, "You truly belong with us here among the clouds." Like, this is one of those moments. But I think that what's been beneficial with moving to the remote workforce and the cloud infrastructure, we already knew that the reason it was an attractive concept is the agility for deployment and scaling and so on, and access from around the world. But I think that probably the most important part for preparation was identity access management. Who's touching what, when, how, why are they supposed to? Is it just-in-time access for something whenever they're getting involved? So I think it was something that really helped security teams like refine what they were already moving towards, at least for my case. I feel like we already had a cloud team that was really focused on this. We also had the ability to really launch off the protection in the cloud that was made pretty strong with our partnership with Microsoft. So I think there's a lot to be found there with the telemetry of the cloud, not just for Relativity 1, not just for Microsoft, but just across the entire board of the threat landscape. There became so many new things that were happening that were not great. And a lot of different spinning up of new campaigns, trying to really get, past things with the antiquated phishing attacks that still come out. So like all of these things were still going to happen, and they increased, but they allowed our security team to become much more effective and like fine-tune detections and capabilities with our access management. And I think that's what we really strove for to double down on quickly. And I think that's what I've seen as a trend, that's the same concepts that other people have been focusing on. So I'll actually toss that to Joey and Ricardo. Is that also your experience?
Yeah, I was just kind of sitting here contemplating that. It's been interesting as we went into the pandemic. I think collaboration, like you said, is super important. And 2 years ago, I kind of keep a rolling like 2-year roadmap because tech's moving so fast that it's like hard to do much longer than that. But when I went to my board, I said, look, the 3 pillars that this is going to be built on for the next several years are data centricity, identity, and automation and orchestration, right? Everything's going to kind of fall into those things. And it's, so we put tools in place, but once the whole workforce kind of went remote, the rest of the business stakeholders kind of started to get that. They understood the message a little bit better. Now they're like, oh, I get it. I understand what you mean when you talk about identity as the perimeter. Like you said, when we're looking at whether you're doing it with Microsoft or whatever, the ability to kind of innately tag data, apply policy to it, and then have that map across an ecosphere with a singular kind of rule set. It empowers us to do things differently. Whereas, Ricardo, you were talking about like traditional DLP, like we saw the same thing. We kind of moved away from our network-based DLP a while ago because the traffic just wasn't flowing through there. When we went through this, automation routines had to be reevaluated because they were automating based on assumptions of workflows going traffic patterns that weren't happening anymore, right? And so we would see, like, sometimes it's not just the alerts and stuff you see, it's the stuff that you're seeing not popping anymore, and you're going, hey, why aren't we seeing any noise there or any volume? And you're like, oh, we got to go, re-architect the automation routine, which is kind of like, automation is great and you can't keep throwing people at it, but like then you got to realize once you start automating things, then you got to manage the automation ecosphere as well. So because that takes a lot of TLC. And we saw a lot of that, but it's been great, and it's really helped the organization to understand. I think the broader organization to understand the criticality of the IAM function and how much that identity matters and how much it empowers them, right? To be able to really be able to be adaptable and flexible and do anything they want with what they're providing them. So that's been fun to kind of go through.
If you try to lock anything down too much with process or anything, you'll realize that people will quickly find a different way to access it. It's not going to take that process. So you have to make it as streamlined as possible.
One last thing I would say is from a learning curve perspective is just on the GRC teams a lot. They are used to evaluating controls and criteria based on on-prem technologies and having to get them to understand risk scenarios around APIs and DevOps and how those things kind of are in a different world. They're like, well, when was the last time you rebooted the server? It's like, we're not having that conversation anymore, folks. So that's been kind of a learning curve.
So Luke has been a little short, as we all know, to be a stormtrooper, but the Imperials should have noticed that. How are you guys approaching identity verification and authentication, since the users, attackers, can really be anywhere now, just like our end users? They can be anywhere. What about passwords, MFA, zero trust? Is it enough? And why or why not? Who wants to tackle that one?
I'll start.
Ricardo?
Sure, why not? Why not? So identity is core. We just had this conversation. It all starts with identity. And I don't want to say it's not enough, but MFA, zero trust, it's all, you want to just make it that much incrementally harder to get to whatever you call your crown jewels. If you even want to put ACLs, that's fine. It's just those stacking controls that need to be maintainable. Going back to what you said, Joey, there's a lot of TLC. You want to be able to automate as much of those controls as possible. And adding MFA, that's fine. The bad guys will find ways to get around MFA. How many people in the audience, yes, virtual audience, still have basic authentication on your Office 365 tenant? I mean, there's always these little holes, WS Trust, so on and so forth. It's how you build a program and how you react to your threats. You need to make sure that your program isn't stuck in stone and it's fluid and dynamic based on the threat landscape. So I think taking that approach is a lot more effective than saying, all right, this year we're doing an 8-month project to implement MFA. Next 2 years we'll do zero trust only on these core items. It's really taking that step back and prioritizing where your highest risk areas are and put in tools and processes that are automated, identity driven, and being able to be fluid as the threats change. I know it sounds like this perfect utopia, but if you build it right, you can have these incremental modular processes in your program that do not take a behemoth of a project to implement.
I would agree with what you're saying. Joey or Amanda?
I'll let Joey go first.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't disagree with any of that. The thing that I would add on to it, I was kind of thinking, and Ricardo, you kind of dropped off your last statement at the same place, which was basically, you know, is it enough? Well, no, I mean, it's never enough to get to zero risk, right? But, you know, it's not about being at zero risk, right? It's about identifying what are the things that are intolerable to accept risk around and protecting those and helping the business to understand what that is and where you've prioritized and where you've put things. You know, my workflow with our execs, Amanda, is similar to what you described. We meet daily, but all of us meet at least once a week for a couple hours. Security, myself, and then a couple of my VPs are deeply embedded in our growth team and growth strategy for what verticals and what new pursuits we're going to go after. And having that visibility with those teams helps them to understand, hey, let's not architect a security control solution that's going to take us 12 months to implement when the project's only going to run for 9 months to begin with, right? So having those kind of things helps us say, hey, we got something, the business criteria is we've got to move quick, we've got to move fast. We've got to be able to deliver on these things. And we say, okay, if that's the case, then you're going to have to be able to accept moving at this level of risk. It's like the race car scenario I say sometimes, right? I mean, you can put as many security and safety controls on a race car as you want, but eventually you're going to weigh it down and it's never going to achieve its mission of winning the race. It won't crash and nobody will die, but you also won't ever win. So, you know, it's kind of like that way of going about and aligning with the business is really where you kind of get the efficacy of it.
So, Han Solo, as we all know, wasn't too happy about stepping up and getting entangled into a rebellion. That was sort of his way and nature. But he did actually become still one of the top generals. So I would love to get your thoughts here. Are you grimacing at the challenges that are in front of you, or are you still psyched about the opportunities that are headed your way? So Amanda, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, the reluctant hero sounds like every major person in security I've ever met. So it's a mythos that works really well. But I actually would say, and I'm going to take a guess that this will be across the board, everyone would agree, this is like what we came here to do, you know, was to solve security problems. And candidly, it gets a little boring when you've done a really great defense in-depth job at any of these places. And any of the places I've worked at previously, if you have a really great security program, it's like, okay, well, what do we do now? Everything's working great. Then COVID happens or something to that effect. So I think it's one of those things that we all like to be involved to solve these really difficult problems and to rise up those successors like the Sith Lords always having to, so that you know that somebody can take your place and who can still do a good job with this program. So I think that's what we're all here to do, was to solve these kind of problems. And we've all probably reluctantly like maybe grumble about VM or processes for secure by design, et cetera. But in the end, we're here to do that. And I think we enjoy it.
What about you, Ricardo?
Oh, I couldn't agree more, of course. Right? I actually thrive in chaos and I love uncertainty. I could not have predicted this at all. But it adds a little dynamic and change to the monotony, even though security isn't monotonous in general, but you have your phishing, you have your drive-by downloads, whatever you want to call it. This is a new territory for all of us. This isn't like, oh, we're doing our annual DR BCP test. No, this is like infinite DR BCP test right now in perpetuity. And I think it's really exciting. And being able to be closer to the business through this time has been really enlightening for me, and actually seeing the controls and how you work so collaboratively with the business to have that outcome and see it to fruition, I think is really exciting. And I think that's, at the end of the day, security is a business enabler, and seeing it actually have tangible outcomes is really exciting for me.
I agree. Joey, what about you? Final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, of course, right? Totally aligned. I mean, this is what we came here to do. This is what we live for. But, you know, for us, it's been an interesting journey. I mean, we're going into risk scenarios where, you know, technology risk is just one of the risks, right? I mean, we've got thousands of frontline healthcare providers out there working for us, and we need to empower them. We need to empower them to be able to leverage technology securely. They're out there on the front lines, you know, putting themselves in harm's way, doing COVID testing for people, trying to take care of folks who are sick, and you know, there's a lot of risk in that. There's execution risk, there's financial risk, there's also security risk, and so, you know, our job as leaders is to help, you know, illuminate the risk more than it is to eliminate the risk sometimes, right? And so, so yeah, I mean, that's what we're here for. Game on, right? Everyone's got to play until they get punched in the face.
Absolutely. We're all psyched. Woohoo! Well, I just want to thank all of you for taking time today and sharing all your fun thoughts. I know I had a great time. This was actually a very fun panel to have a Star Wars and REM kind of theme built into it, which is not harder than normal. I really enjoyed it. I also want to say thank you to CornCon for letting us take part in their digital event and inviting us to be here today. We hope that you enjoyed the rest of the program as well. And if you'd like to connect with T.E.N in the future, check us out online at ten-inc.com and learn about our ISC programs, our ISC cocktails and conversations, and our ISC fireside webinars and more. So thank you very much for joining us today. And Ricardo, Amanda, and Joey, may the force be with you.